So if you go over to your App Store, there it is, Filmic Pro, if you see it on the top right there. There used to be 2 versions of it. I think there's just one now. And I already purchased it here. I think it's $9 for the app. That's how much it costs. But last year, as in the end of 2016, the film that won at Sundance, it was called Tangerine. It was filmed on an iPhone 6. That's what it was filmed on. So.
I have somebody who wants to.
Okay. And they used this exact same app. They used a couple accessories like this where they had a case to hold on to it, and they used some special glass in front of the lens to make it a little better, if you will. But otherwise, it was a $10 app. They had the budget if they wanted to film it on something big, they could have. But for fun, I think they teamed up with Filmic Pro and some others to make the project there. So like I said, it works. You can download it from the App Store if you have an Apple device. If you have an Android, I think you have to go to their website, which is just filmicpro.com, to see that. Now, the one caution I would say beginning off with all of this is that space on your iPad, your device, whatever, is going to be the hardest thing to control. So within Filmic Pro, you have the ability to basically to create a higher bit rate, which will give you a little better quality. But if you're worried about the amount of space you have on your device, my suggestion would be to have something that has at least 32 gigabytes. I know with phones that's harder. But if you have at least 32 gigabytes and you had at least 20 gig free, you could probably film for a good hour of raw footage and be just fine. Okay? So hopefully if you're making a movie, you're just filming short little pieces like 15 seconds here, 20 seconds there, and you're not filling up, lots and lots of data, but you could. Okay, so here's our app here. It's called Filmic Pro. Has a little right arm bend to it. And when it first pulls up, or when it first opens up, it's kind of like the movie, your basic camera built into an iPhone. It's going to auto-expose, auto-color correct, and every time you do something in front of the camera, it's constantly shifting back and forth. You can tell how the temperature changes. It goes from kind of a bluish color to kind of a yellow color there. And so it's not so much that auto exposure is a bad thing, but the color temperature is what really kills any camera. You can tell right off the bat if something's not been manually controlled because the color changes are always happening. And when you walk around the room, let's just say this is regular video camera, as I walk around the room, it may fight for a little while to get auto. I'm going off of Wi-Fi, that's why it's slow here, but it's trying to get that focus on there, and it's having a hard time doing it. Okay, and especially when it gets darker in a room, it's going to have a hard time figuring out where the focus is. So having manual controls over that's pretty cool. So just kind of a quick walkthrough here. If you look right now, you can see that little green bar in the top left there. It's picking up some audio from the microphone here, and so it has an audio waveform to tell you here's your volume. That's something else we'll talk a lot about is how you work around the audio, because this is still not a great audio capture device, but at close range for interviews and things, you can make it work if you wanted to. So, starting in the middle, there's your battery life of your device, and this is kind of a gauge as to how much space you have left. It's actually pretty darn accurate. So when I film with my little phone here, this is just a 5C and it's like 8 gig. So I can film about 10 minutes on this and then I'm done, right? But as I look at it, I really watch that gauge to see how much space am I filling up here. This is your settings piece right here. This is actually kind of like the playback button where you click on it and lets you review the footage you've just shot. There's your record button there. Over here then, these are your 3 controls, and I'll point it to you a couple times. So on the left, that weird box with the triangles is your white balance, okay? And white balance is where you tell it what color temperature the thing is you're looking at, okay? So you guys have ever filmed before, do you guys kind of know the difference between like daylight balance versus Kelvin temperatures or anything? That's cool if you don't, okay? So this is what we call mixed lighting in here right now. These are fluorescent bulbs, and if we're using a Kelvin scale to say what's the color temperature, this is somewhere in the 4,000s, low 4,000 color temperature. Outside is usually their standard around 6,000 down to about 5,600 Kelvin. And you think of it like a star. The color of the star tells you the temperature. The hotter the star, the higher the number, the bluer it looks to our eyes, or the whiter. And so the brighter it is, we get higher numbers. The cooler it is, like our inside lights, the yellow ones, it's a lower number, okay? So to change this on here, what you actually do is they suggest that the first thing you do is set your exposure. And just by way of example here, I've got this background over here, which is our kind of our white wall. And I'm going to go ahead and move this circle right here. That's my exposure, okay? So I put my hand here, and it's not even in focus, but I'm going to drop it on there. And if the temperature is correct, when I tap on it, it's going to lock the exposure. And no matter what happens, when I take it off the tripod here, it should automatically be trying to raise the exposure for back here, but it's staying the same. It's staying dark, and it's staying the same temperature. If that's off, see how it's changing? And we're making it all kinds of noisy. It doesn't look very pleasing because it's too dark. There's just not enough light for it. So if I go over here and I say, you know what, no brighter than that, and I lock it, that's a pretty sweet tool. I've auto-exposed and I've locked it into one temperature right there. But it can actually be a lot more accurate than that if you want it to be. Okay, so we're gonna leave it right there. Again, that's not focus, it's just the exposure. And ideally, if you're filming outside, you wanna try to get someone's skin tone, like their face or their hand or whatever, and you're trying to expose for that instead of the background. Okay? Next to the focus, that's the box here. It's really easy, you just simply drag it, and let's just say put it on the ring right there. If it's in the background here, it takes a little while to find it. But if I set it here and I lock it, believe it or not, even though it's just an iPad here, it actually has a little bit of depth of field. And so you can actually set a focus, so as you're walking with somebody, they're in focus and behind them's a little bit out of focus. Okay? The white balance then, when I click on it, let's get this over here. See, there's no actual icon on the screen to drag around, it's just either it's on or off. But if I click and I hold it for a second, it shows me my color temperature right there. Okay, so just watch this for a second. As I tap and I hold that, see how it's turning more yellow? We just told you before that the more yellow something is, that the temperature is lower. But in this case, we're increasing the daylight temperature so it warms things up. Okay? And outside, you know, probably the average is going to be between 6,000 and 5,600. Inside, right now to make this room white, I'm going to guess these are around 4,100 degrees Kelvin. And if I get too blue, then I say, oh, it's not warm enough. So I can just kind of manually adjust that there if I want to. Okay, that's actually a really sweet thing. That's actually on DSLRs and higher-end cameras. We're always fighting to get our daylight exposure or our daylight temperature the exact color, so you don't have to sit there and recorrect your color skins because it makes it harder. Okay. Okay, up here on the top, a couple more tools. If I click the arrow up there on the top, it gives you some really cool guides. You certainly don't have to use all these. But as you're filming, let's say you put this, well, first of all, this one right here, that basically allows you to control your volume manually. It's not awesome, but considering I have a microphone on here, I can manually turn up the volume gain, turn it down, if you will, and it gives us some control to that right there. Okay. Matt, it's running, I just don't know how the volume's doing, so good luck with that. Okay, the grid up there, do you guys recognize that? The top grid? Some cameras have the ability to put a little graph on there so you can kind of frame things up. Puts our magic lines on there. You're not actually going to record this, but if you want to frame something up to give you a leading edge, it's kind of a nice little tool. Here you can turn the auto shake on and off here. Oops. And again, I'd probably keep it on the whole time, but if you're locked down on a tripod, you could turn it off if you wanted to there. Now, see how the temperature or the exposure dropped way down? I don't know why I did that, so I'm going to click on the red, get the exposure back where it should be, lock it again. Okay. Here we can change the rotation of our camera. I'm not going to do that. And then down here in the settings, let's go through this just a little bit here. And please ask questions if I'm going too fast right here. This is really the one you'll go through the most, okay? So when the group that filmed Tangerine did their film, part of the reason why they did it is they had the ability to change the look of their shot. So instead of being a standard rectangle, which we call 16:9, they wanted a cinematic widescreen look to it, okay? Well, the truth is, without an anamorphic lens, without some fancy attachments here, all you can do is crop the top and the bottom down. So normally on a higher end camera, we put on what's called overlays. It's a gray bar, and it just tells you this is what it could look like when it's all done. But in this case, this will actually put on the bars permanently. So when you basically put out the image, it's got the widescreen look to it right from the beginning. But just so you know, it's still a 1080p image, if you will. So over here, going through the images, depending on how you're going to edit this, you can change everything. You could say, you know what, for my overlays, I don't want this look. I want a cinematic widescreen. And like I said, it's going to burn in those bars for you. So it's a cool look. It makes it look like it's a Hollywood movie, if you will. And there's different versions of that. Okay. Now, the point I do want to point you to, though, this is pretty slick. Here we could change, depending on your device. If you have a newer phone, obviously it shoots in 4K, or if it's like a 6 plus or whatever they were, you can actually film at different frame rates. So in this case, I'm just going to shoot it at 1080, is my size of my pixels, and I'm going to shoot it at around 24 frames a second. But I could slow it down to 96. It's just a way of interpolating it. I could slow it down to half that. And see where it says 32 megabytes? By changing this, I'm going to get a little more detail, a little less compression in the image. And so I'm not going to say it's perfect, but in the early days of DSLR filming, the problem was always you got really low bit rate. And so when you'd film, if your exposure wasn't just right and you tried to color correct it or bring up your shadows, it just fell apart. And so I can actually change the default of 12 megabits per second, clear up to 50. And I will tell you, it does work. It does give you a lot more information for that. It's just, we're not shooting like on a red epic here or anything. It's better, just not best, if you will. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay? As far as navigation, I'm actually going to click on the resolution bar again. And then we've got frame rates. We could change it up here, faster, slower. For the audio here, in this case, I'm going to change it from the internal microphone, and just by tapping on it here, it says headset microphone, and that's what I'm using for audio here. Okay? So just by way of pausing for a second, how many of you, as far as the film festival, are planning on recording your audio separately? Like someone's going to record the audio and someone's going to record the video. You know that? Maybe, possibly. Okay. So a lot of cameras, for example, Matt's filming with that back there. We have a wireless mic going to it. So I've got controls on my side. He's got controls on his side. But he has proper inputs that control that and make it so it's not so noisy. In this case, whether I shot with my phone here or this one here, most devices do not use a standard 3.5-inch jack. So when I plug this in, see how it's got the 3 black bars? They call this a TSS or a TRS input here. All right on that, Matt?
I think that's right.
Okay, one of them is the 3.5, one's a 2.5 jack here. So I bought this little adapter here. It was like $10. This allows me to put in a basic microphone that is self-powered, doesn't require any power here. And when I plug it in, it fits just like a headphone jack here. But you have to have that adapter for a device. You can't just take a regular, stereo microphone and plug it in. People go down to Radio Shack, for example, and they'll buy something that looks like this. They're like, oh, here's my lavalier mic. And on the bottom, it has what looks like a small input. You can't just go shoving that in there. It has to be the right jack for that. Okay? So at the kickoff event, if you do decide to come to that, which I would encourage you, there's free pizza. And we're giving away 2 microphones like this for free. It's a door prize. So if you didn't have a device, there's a chance to win that. We're also going to give away some monopods and some things that are stabilizers to use a phone for this type of thing. Okay? Any questions on this? Okay? So as far as the ability to take in a microphone versus the front or the back, that's what you got right there. The other nice thing is it does, oops, lost connection for a second here. It does give you better control on the audio recording. Instead of being a very low AIFF bit rate, it's a full wave format, which gives you a lot more audio information. Boy. Sorry guys, just a second. Got too many apps open. Minecraft. God, okay, there it is. There we go, okay. So back into the settings here. Lots of different options for this. Again, the film that did very well at Sundance, they used some additional hardware that allowed it to then basically change and do an anamorphic look to this. But all I would say to people is I've shot some stuff. Matt and I were in Ecuador last year. We filmed a whole bunch of stuff on some basic GoPros. We ended up using that for our B-roll throughout a lot of a very big film. And people very much underestimate how much a little camera can do for stuff. I was down in Oklahoma about 3 months ago. We were filming a sequence on an Indian reservation. And the one thing I totally forgot to get was the sign that says, "Warning, entering Indian territory." Now, it's stereotypical, it's not politically correct, but we wanted to get that image because it's this intimidating thing when you drive past that line. So I called up my buddy Alex down there. I said, "Alex, have you got your phone with you?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Could you please film that for me?" And I said, "I want you to do a little pan shot or a little tilt shot." And I said, "Point at the ground, hit record, and just slowly go up like this for me and get the sign." It was cinematic. It was perfect, okay? And so the point is, people, we get this big idea in our heads, we have to shoot with the same camera all the way through, it's just not gonna work. But you can get some pretty good results with all this, okay? Any questions on that? So let's say you film for an hour. You begin to filling up your device, you're like, oh boy, how do I get this off here? There's two easier ways to do it. What I would recommend is go ahead and plug in your lightning bolt adapter, plug in your cord, plug it into your device. Let's say you're on a Mac or a PC system. By default, this has in the playback section here, it stores it within the app. Not really, but it's viewable within the app itself. So for example, here's a shot with the kids, but there's only one shot there. So I'll push play. But what would make more sense is if I'm editing on a Mac, I know that whenever I plug in my phone, the Photos app always opens up. I actually hate that, but it just does. So what you can do is inside of Filmic Pro, in your settings, you can actually tell it where to place the video footage once it's shot. And if you tell it to go inside of the Photos section, so let's do presets. Maybe it is here. Okay, that top left bar, I think that's it. No. Well, for the sake of editing that, we're going to skip ahead. I believe it's inside the settings here. It gives you the option to store it onto your camera roll. And that's probably the easiest place to put it. And so the moment you begin recording to the moment it stops, it automatically places it inside of that folder for you. And then when you go inside of your photos here, that color one right there, they're all right there instead of one link, just all the individual video files. And then when I plug it in to my editing device, like Adobe, like Final Cut, like a lot of others, it automatically will show up like a disk image. And it'll say, oh, do you want to import this? And you say yes, as you pull it in. Okay? So it's very easy to get this on and off. The other thing we haven't talked about, though, is if you have a bigger device like an iPad, you could certainly edit it on the device itself. And so if you've already had a chance to edit on higher-end programs, you know there's benefits of doing that by having multiple layers of track. But for the sake of shooting it, an iPad is a very good device because you can do it all in the same thing right there. Okay. Any questions about that? Yes?
Would you suggest the zoom for the camera?
For the audio? Yes.
For screen, I mean,
Certainly, if that's the camera you've got, obviously it's nice to have that option because you can stay planted in some places there. You're not going to be able to zoom very easily on a device like this. So, are you asking more for the kind of camera to use? It depends. This actually has a deeper function in it where you can actually set what's called a rack focus, and you can actually tell it to start here, and not only start here and focus here, you can actually tell it to zoom out, but it's limited. So my suggestion would be no, I would actually move with my hands or move with my feet if possible. Okay? Now, since this is kind of a workshop on filming with this type of device, I just want to show you a couple accessories, give you an idea of what it takes to put it onto at least a tripod. This is relatively cheap and ugly, this big plastic hulking thing, but it does work and it does come with some basic lenses. So If I was shooting with an iPad, this whole kit here without the microphone was about $100. It was the plastic guy here, and it came with 2 lenses. And all they do is they magnify it bigger. It's not really making it sharp or anything. It just takes a standard 35 millimeter framing, and that makes it into a 75 millimeter telephoto. And it comes with a wide angle because sometimes this is actually not wide enough. So about $100 there. For a little phone, if you get on Amazon, you can pick up things like this. This was $6 on Amazon. It has a tripod plate on the bottom and on the top. And it's got a spring on it, so it'll fit any 4.5 inch to 6 inch phone right there. Okay, super cheap. I'll probably break it in a couple weeks, but they're as cheap as that. And of course, you can get high-end ones that are all metal and everything else. Okay, so just to show you, this does work. You still have to have a tripod plate or something for your device to work. But my daughter, she actually does piano lessons on Skype with somebody. And so this is how we do it. We take a little monopod in her bedroom. This is really silly, Matt. We have a little lantern for our little light just so we can actually see what she's doing. And I set up my monopod above her shoulder like this, looking down. And it's close enough, the audio picks it up, and she can actually play the piano with someone clear out in Utah who's doing the piano lessons with her. But basically, if there's my camera on the back of my iPhone there, hops on just like that. Oops. Here's the magic trick. Okay. So it could be something as simple as that. And like I said, this whole thing cost about $6 just for a basic, clamp holder right there. And some of these are designed to be with or without the case on it itself. Honestly, when I use stuff for filming with an iPhone, this works great when it's close to you. And you guys know if you filmed a lot of stuff with your friends, our natural reaction is to turn it this way to film up and down. But what's wrong with that? Yeah. Okay, it's something bad. Yeah, good.
The frame smaller when it's actually put on with an editing.
Yeah, and so there's ways of working around it. You can do some background things, but because it's going north to south now, you can get a wider angle of the person, but now you have to worry about how am I going to edit that in there. Okay, it still works. And like I said, if you're doing a mixture of footage, sometimes doing what we call found footage, where it's just kind of rough handycam stuff, works the best because all that CNN stuff we see where it's supposedly coming from the live audience, we don't care that it's all shaky when we're seeing bombs going off somewhere. We want to just see what's actually happening there. So my encouragement is whatever you're filming with, if it's a GoPro or an iOS device or Android or whatever, use it and think about ways you can realistically put that in there. Okay? Action cameras, whether it's a GoPro, there's all kinds of other brands out there. Really, the difference between that and using a phone is that phones, we so much think of doing selfie stuff with our videos, whereas GoPros, we're always thinking of it's next to my head, it's next to my chest, it's on my wrist right there. So my encouragement also is think about how you could use this type of device as an action camera rather than just I'm going to try and record it like a tripod piece right there. Okay? Now, going back to audio things, we talked before about how audio can get some devices to help you get into it. This little device right here is called a Rode Micro. It's about $50 for one of these. They typically sell them with a kit with a little dead cat on top here. It's about $60 for one of those. But you have to have an adapter to go into it. Rode is making some new ones that actually attach right where the headphone jack is and it swivels. So there's no cords, it just goes into it right there. But if it was my preference, if you had someone that could record separately on a separate device, you could certainly make it, focus your efforts on getting the right image here and then get your audio separately. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. If you guys just recently showed up, we've been talking about how you can film and how we use a specific app called Filmic Pro to take better control of the iOS devices. Okay? All right, so if there's no other questions, that was my demonstration on this. And then if anybody wants to stay behind, we are going to do kind of a meet and greet with the teams, go over some additional rules and questions you might have. Okay? Thanks, guys.